What is up, everybody? Clint Lamb with Cover Crimson back for another live show after more happenings in the transfer portal. It's a crazy time, some good, some not so good. We're going to be talking about all of it. We're going to be working our way through it together. Appreciate all you guys for being here. I'm going to give everybody a chance to kind of start to get in here. First of all, Stacy, appreciate you, brother. Looking forward to the show. I certainly am too. The fact that we didn't end up going live yesterday was simply because I was waiting on some sort of movement one way or another. Not saying I was waiting on a commitment. I knew that Cam Coleman wasn't going to be making any sort of decision like that. But, as far as how the visit was going, and I understand that the visit is going to be carrying over into later today. So, just trying to see if we could get some sort of new information on that front because I didn't want to go live and share a bunch of stuff and then something like that breaks. And now it's like, man, I already went live. We would certainly have hopped on for a second time, I guess, anyways. But for now, we're just going to continue to ride it out. We will be talking about Cam Coleman, but nothing really new as far as how the visit is going. I know there's some speculation as to the Alabama Instagram account, Alabama football Instagram account following him. And what, there's some conspiracy theorist out there as far as that's concerned, which I'm a tinfoil hat guy myself. When it comes to stuff like this, I always like to have fun with it. So I don't know if that means anything or not. We're going to be talking about all of it, but I appreciate all you guys for being here. Let's see. Let's start getting this thing going. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you guys so much. All of you guys, Tino, Kathy, everybody. Annie, appreciate you being here. Good morning. Phil, appreciate you being here. Let's go ahead and start, I guess, getting into this. I've given everybody enough time at this point to get in here. First of all, Brock the Baller 77. I like this cornerback we got, Carmelo O'Neal. Yes, that is going to be one of the topics of conversation. Alabama did secure Mercer cornerback Carmelo O'Neal. Now, if you Google him, I think he's listed as a safety. Like, that's the first couple of things that pops up. Maybe 24/7 Sports has him listed as a safety. I think that was from his high school rank, profile and what they kind of projected him as, and being 6'4", 200 pounds. I don't know what he was back then, but that's not overly shocking that they were projecting him there with that kind of length and size. And then I think maybe ESPN does as well. He's a corner. And not only that, he's a boundary corner, a big boundary corner. Now, granted, Mercer, I was trying to find a lot of tape. I already made the mistake once with Devin Tompkins. Not going to do it again, trying to find anything that I could get my hands on. I watched him against Western Carolina. Now, granted, I did not have the All-22, haven't found any available Mercer All-22, but I will continue to try to search on that to where I can share probably a complete, honest assessment. It's going to be kind of limited watching the TV broadcast angle. I only can see so much, especially at corner, but at the same time, I think he's pretty good. I mean, really, like I said, he plays to the boundary. He looks massive on tape or on TV, I guess. Absolutely massive. I mean, he looks thick. He looks big. He looks a lot like Dijon Lee. Like, they have similar size and length, so that's not surprising. But you would think him being out there, he's more of an outside linebacker type, and he's playing corner. And I think for the most part, I mean, he's not going to have the hip fluidity and all those things of a much smaller corner. Obviously, when you're that big, it takes you a little bit longer to change directions, but he's not clunky whatsoever. I think he's pretty smooth on that front from what I've seen. And, I think as far as playing in, he runs a lot of cover 3, or at least they did against Western Carolina. So, that's something where that's going to fit into what Kane Wommack predominantly likes to have. Those big, long corners. It's hard to get the football over the top of them and can play physical at the line of scrimmage and do some of those things. So I like O'Neal a lot. I really do. I think is he expected to come in and compete for a starting job? No, I don't think so. But I think losing a guy like Cam Calhoun like this, from a portal rankings perspective, he might not be as highly thought of as, Cam Calhoun was last year. But I think that he's kind of the more experienced guy that you bring in because behind those top 2 guys, Xavier Brown and Dijon Lee, you don't have a ton of experience. Chuck McDonald didn't get a lot of experience this past season. You got Jordan Edmonds. You got, a couple of other guys, but I feel like a guy like O'Neal brings that experience, and he's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. So, it's possible that after Xavier Brown, which I would fully expect Xavier to be gone after the 2026 season, assuming he continues to climb and progress like he has through his first 2 seasons, I would fully expect him to be gone. So there will be an opportunity for O'Neal to potentially contribute as a starter maybe in 2027. Now, Jordan Edmonds might have something to say about that. Zion Gibson's another one, highly rated freshman coming in, might have something to say about that. But I do think that O'Neal is certainly an intriguing piece that Alabama has added. Is he a frontline guy for 2026? No. And based off of the fact that Alabama is kind of, maybe you want to call it, missed on some of these guys at the top, that's, fans aren't going to be overly excited about this probably, but they should be. I think it's a good piece, and it really helps the depth on the defensive side. Let's see what else we got. Been waiting on this since the Smothers news. Yeah, when that happened super late last night, I thought about at like, what time was that, 10 or 11 p.m.? I considered just going ahead and jumping on and doing a live right there, but I thought, you know what, I'm gonna wait and kind of let things settle down a little bit, try to get some more clarity on the situation, because like I said on Twitter, it isn't a great look if you're Alabama. This isn't Jordan Ross. This isn't Ja'Carius Peak. These aren't guys that you really wanted, and you tried to get them on campus where you can make your pitch, and they just never gave you that opportunity. That's way different. Hollywood Smothers was on campus. You made your pitch, and the pitch was good enough to get him to commit. He didn't sign, though. Now, why he didn't sign, I don't know. I don't know the details of that situation, but that's not a great look considering you couldn't secure the signature, and that has led to Texas jumping over here, getting Raleek Brown already. Now they were able to, and get him signed. Now they're able to turn their attention to Hollywood Smothers and convince him to visit and all that. Now, granted, someone texted me and said, I don't know. I need to. I don't want to comment on that because I didn't read it for myself. I'm going off of what somebody else is claiming. But I will say this: if a recruit actively lies to a member of the Bama media or any media, and that is proven to be accurate information, and it's got to be proven that it's accurate information, or at least come from a very reliable source, which I don't have. But if that ends up being the case, more than likely that said player would be willing to lie to your coaching staff too. And so I don't know that I would want to have that as part of the roster. Once again, that's kind of unfair for me to say because I don't, have proof. But anyways, I probably shouldn't have said that. I'm live. This is why you probably don't go live. I'll work to get more clarification on that. Let's see. Sean Ray, Cal just signed Jimothy Lewis. Jimothy Lewis has a lot of potential. And when I went and watched the tape, I was impressed with what I saw. Now, I'd already been exposed to him through covering Mississippi State a little bit, and I knew that there was a lot of inconsistency there, a lot of up and down play. This guy had probably the most talent on Mississippi State's roster as far as offensive linemen are concerned. And their offensive line 2 years ago when he was a true freshman was terrible. In 2025, it wasn't that great. And yet he started 4 games. He played both left and right tackle, and he wasn't providing the consistency that they needed. He was one of those problems for them. So, but at the same time, I understood why you were targeting that type of talent. He fit schematically. There was still upside, and if you could trust your coaching staff to get development out of him, you could have turned him into a good player. What I will say is a guy like Ty Haywood comes available. You already, don't end up getting the opportunity to pitch Peak. He ends up committing to South Carolina, which was a massive get for them. They're swinging for the fences on the offensive line because they were terrible as well. They signed a bunch of really good players from the high school ranks, or at least a couple of really good players who can come in and contribute early. They signed Peak. They signed the East Carolina tackle, who's probably going to be playing right tackle for them, was a pretty serviceable, steady player. So they're really doing a lot as far as paying guys money, getting them in there to try to protect Lenore Sellers. You were able to convince him to stick around. That was not done without them making some sort of promises to make sure they're going to put more around him and give him more help so we could put his skill set on display for NFL evaluators. But you missed peak, and a lot of people thought, okay, Timothy Lewis now becomes more of a priority. But I think Lewis, the fact that Ty Haywood was, came into the mix potentially, I think they were probably slow playing Timothy Lewis and were trying to hold off to figure out what they could get done elsewhere. And Timothy Lewis probably didn't want to wait. So that's one where I look at. I will call it when I feel like it's a miss and a bad look. I'll say that. Hollywood Smothers feels like a pretty bad look right now. Timothy Lewis, I'm not really blaming the coaching staff much there at all, based off of what I know. Garrett Smith, what's up, man? Love your show. Appreciate you so much. Let's see. Let's continue to work our way through. Hampton, that's funny. I'm not going to pull it up, but that's a funny comment. Yeah, Sean Ray, long corners are great for cover 3. Love his fit force. Yeah, it's I always compare it to like the Legion of Boom, Seattle Seahawks, back when they had that elite defense. You had Richard Sherman, 6'3", I think 195 pounds. You had Brandon Browner, 6'4", 220. Big, long corners that really made it tough to throw over the top of them. That length really shows up when you're playing cover 3, and they got to bail to the deep parts of the field. But, there's other elements to that, and I think Alabama in a lot of ways has some of those elements. But that's why I like O'Neal. I think he's a really intriguing ad, and the fact that he's got multiple years of eligibility, if he only had one, I would say, okay, this is pretty good for depth. But, I probably don't think he's going to ever be, anything massive, because I just wouldn't have thought at corner he would have started over Xavier Brown or Dijon Lee. But the fact that he's got multiple years and Xavier Brown could end up being a guy who enters the NFL draft a year early, there might be some opportunities for at least some competition in 2027. And speaking of Dijon Lee and some of those guys, one other thing that I want to bring up has just been, some people have been annoyed by the fact that Alabama's been announcing the players who are returning and putting it on Yay Alabama and kind of making it a big deal. They're kind of re-upping, getting them taken care of financially. It's kind of like I said on Twitter, it sends multiple messages. And one that I didn't mention that I probably should have is it sends the message that you're taking care of your own. Hey, if you're a guy like O'Neal and you're considering committing, they're making it a big deal when they simply keep their guys. So, and they're highlighting that those guys were taken care of. They've stayed loyal. They have shown potential. They're impact players. And I still think there's an emphasis on roster retention, but it's retaining the right guys. And so, putting that, on display, I think that's good from a recruiting standpoint. If you're O'Neal, you get on campus, you do what you're supposed to. You're a guy who they really feel like is a big part of the plans. They'll take care of you. They're not going to say, hey, we already got you. We're not worried about you. It's taking care of your own. Another thing that it helps is it sends a message to other teams. This guy just signed a new contract. Stop recruiting him. We took care of him ourselves. No need. There's a lot of back channeling and backdooring right now, trying to get guys into the transfer portal. It's making that announcement. I do think that there is some level of Bama fans are freaking out right now because you potentially are about to lose one of your top portal commitments that had everybody really excited in what he does for the offense. You didn't end up getting Jacarius Peak, who I talked about extensively. Everybody wanted him, big offensive tackle recruit. You miss on Jordan Ross because he goes to Baton Rouge first, and they won't let the guy leave, and they make sure he's paid a ton of money to not leave. And so fans are frustrated. I think it's the coaching staff letting everybody know, hey, we're working. We're trying to make this stuff happen here. We're not just sitting on, twiddling our thumbs, not doing anything. We're making sure that the key priority players for our team are staying on the roster. And, so I think it sends that message. I just think there's a lot of reasons why it's beneficial, for Alabama to do that. I have no problem with it. I know it feels like compensating or it feels unnecessary to some fans, but I think that, I'm appreciating that they're sharing these things, because this is pretty much saying, hey, you know what? Lottie Brooks, he's committed to Alabama. He's committed to Kalen DeBoer. I like the fact that they're highlighting that. And a lot of these other players, Austin Mack, it's announcing to the world, Ty Simpson's moving on to the NFL. He's committed to Alabama. Keelan Russell, everybody's worried about him entering the transfer portal. All these coaches, there was rumors about coaches talking to him after games and everything else. He's committed to Alabama. He's committed to this team. I understand some people view it as unnecessary. I like it. I really do. So I have no issues with that. Anyways, just wanted to get that off my chest, I guess, and maybe put some perspective on it. Appreciate. Don't just expect this guy was already on the roster. He's here. There's no reason to get excited. I understand what your logic is. Your logic is we had him already, and we maybe didn't have the kind of season we wanted to have. We need more than him. So yeah, that's great. But I was already assuming that we were going to keep this guy. I mean, but just stop and appreciate it. Don't just expect, hey, he was on the roster this year. If they want to keep him, they'll keep him. And then just appreciate the fact that they are still here, because a lot of these guys are being enticed with a lot of money to not be here. You see what I'm saying? So, appreciate those guys. Really stop and appreciate those guys. Let's see. We'll get some of these super chats. P Phils, what's up? Appreciate the $4.99 super chat. I questioned the impact of going to 105 scholarships with NIL. Now I am concerned filling 85 quality players. Will we improve? Thoughts? One thing about it is, so Jackson Shuttlesworth, the tight end from Jacksonville State, he was the other commitment. Want to go ahead and bring him up because he's technically a preferred walk-on. Redshirt freshman, 6'5", 230 pounds for the Gamecocks, and hadn't played. There's nothing to go off of. I can't really tell you. Maybe I could go find his high school highlights. I have not done that. It's pretty fresh news, and I didn't even really know he was on the radar. But that's one where it's been made very clear he is a preferred walk-on. They're filling out depth with a lot of these guys, and so that 85 to 105, it could the bottom half of the bottom part of your roster is going to be filled with some of these guys, but you also have some players potentially who probably typically would have been on another team's 85 previously, but they're electing to be on yours in that 86 to 105 range. You can kind of really help the back half of your depth chart. And one other thing is that someone pointed out on Twitter, and I just want to make sure that we're clarifying exactly where things are at. There's like 6 days left, or 5 or 6 days left to enter the transfer portal. There's not 5 or 6 days left to sign players. I think there's this misconception right now that they have to get all these guys signed in less than a week, or they're in big trouble and they're going to be left short of numbers. That's not true. You just got to enter. Guys will continue to be signed long after the portal window closes, long after. So, but getting back to your question, you're concerned about filling 85 quality players. There's still tons. They said 30% of the players in college football are currently in the transfer portal. That is crazy. That is a crazy amount of people. Number one, that's going to take some time to sift through, especially if you're trying to find diamonds in the rough. It's going to take time. Number two is, while some of these players were acting like, and I think that it's recruiting rankings that get you, like these 4 and 5 star guys, really mostly I think they're 4 stars in the transfer portal right there at the top. Everybody sees those and they're like, man, there's like 10, 20 really impactful transfer players. And if you don't get those guys, that means you didn't have a good portal class. That's not true. There are guys well beyond that who are very, very good football players or have tremendous upside. I don't know where Ty Haywood is. I need to go check, but like, he's the type of player where he's probably not going to be super highly rated in the transfer portal. Maybe he is because he still has that high school shine and he really didn't play a whole lot for Michigan this year. But, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a 3-star. And if he is, that's one where it's like, okay, I get it. I get why they rank him as a 3-star, but he can end up still being the 5-star guy that he was supposed to be coming out of high school. There's very limited information that would dispute he has that ability. And so, I will say, just because Alabama has missed on some of their early guys, it's unfortunate. I hate it. And once again, Hollywood Smothers, not a great look if that ends up working out where he ends up going to Texas. But otherwise, that's part of NIL. I do think there might be a little bit of a change in philosophy following the way that this is working out, because, and I mean for Alabama, because, the high school recruiting is going to remain very important. Do not get me wrong. That's not going away. But I think that maybe some of the philosophy might shift a little bit. We'll have to wait and see to the transfer portal. But the way that the portal, it's something that I really didn't think about, but it became pretty obvious in hindsight was this is more that having one transfer portal window. And if you can get a guy in and get a guy signed quickly, it becomes like high school recruiting, the way that high school recruiting used to be, in the sense of once you got a guy locked in, like it would be the wine and dine and everything's good, great, and wonderful. As soon as he'd signed on that dotted line and he really couldn't do anything, coaches got real honest with players. There was no more, I got to, treat you like you're the greatest thing in the world. There was some humbling that happened post signing because they couldn't really transfer and didn't have the options that they do now. Well, having one portal window, and once that window closes, if you've already signed with somebody, the next chance or opportunity you're going to have of if they lied to you or they misled you or whatever, the only thing you can do is stick around for that year. Maybe you end up leaving the team and going to hang out for a while. And doing nothing, but you can't enter the transfer portal again post spring because you don't like how it's working out and go elsewhere. You're stuck. So, and I'm not saying that Texas did this with Raleigh Brown, but I did bring up, if he was probably told they're going to bring in multiple running backs, and if they did, then he's probably expecting this and he has no problem with it. But had they misled him and led him to believe like he was being brought in as the main priority at that position, and he wouldn't really, he would have to compete a little bit, but he was expected to kind of more so be the workhorse. But then as soon as you get him signed and he's locked in, you immediately turn your attention to a guy who's rated higher than him in the transfer portal. You end up bringing him on campus, and then you get him locked in because he didn't sign with Alabama. And now you've got to share the workload that you weren't expecting to share. That can be misleading, and that could have, had he not been locked in after signing, or if this would have been done closer to the end of the transfer portal window, then he might have not had the opportunity to bounce. So he would have been stuck. And granted, I think that would be a bad look for future recruits, but technically there's nothing he could have done about it. He's locked in at that point. So, it's just right now, there's a lot that I think people are learning and how this all works. It's very car salesman-esque, and for any car salesman that's watching this, I don't mean that as any disrespect. I've bought a car before and I went in and I didn't know what to expect. It was the first time I bought a car. And next thing I know, I'm walking out like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I've bought the car and I got taken to the woodshed, if I'm being honest with you. I just didn't know what to expect. And man, they are really good at what they do. I was buying warranties I didn't need and everything else. It was a very valuable lesson for me, but it's, they're very good at what they do. You're seeing a lot of that. They're getting these guys in, and it's this salesman tactic of don't let them leave, just keep them on the hook. And if you can make it happen. I think Lane Kiffin right now, he's very much that way. He was willing to let Sam Leavitt leave when he thought he had other options with the Washington quarterback. But as soon as that didn't end up working out, now that cat is doing whatever it takes to get him signed. He's going to Knoxville. He'll go meet you. He did the same thing with A.J. McCarron. That story about him being at Tennessee and trying to, pitch A.J. and being outside of his window. I think I have that story correct. But this guy, when he feels like you're really needed, he'll do whatever it takes. He gets pretty desperate, it seems like. But he also has some hustle, and I respect that. Everybody's trying to navigate. Everybody's trying to navigate this right now. It's going to take some time. But at the same time, I still don't think there's any reason for panic amongst the fan base. We can acknowledge that it's like Alabama loses a game in the regular season. It's like, man, this isn't good, and these things didn't look good, and there are some concerns here. We need to address those concerns, but it's no reason for everybody. The sky's not falling. Like, this doesn't have to be the end. It could still be okay. That's kind of the way I'm approaching this right now. Brandon from DC, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Bama must roll to the Midwest, Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, and pull a couple of their offensive linemen or offensive line coaches. Indiana has proven that age, experience, and hunger can be the foundation in this era. What I will say, none of those cats care about money. Oh, I lie. That's not really it. They care about it. But as far as being a priority for them, the money that they were getting offered by Indiana wasn't substantial. It wasn't crazy. Now, I'm sure Fernando Mendoza and some of those guys, yeah, I'm sure they had to pay them their fair share. Fernando Mendoza was a very highly sought after quarterback, if I recall correctly, in the transfer portal. I liked him at Cal. But they have a bunch of guys that are more so built around the old way, the team way. And how I make my mark is not becoming super rich. A lot of these guys probably weren't even like expecting opportunities on the NFL level. It's more so, and they're still working towards that, don't get me wrong, but it's more so how I become legendary, how my name gets remembered is for what we do right here, right now. And what we do as a group. The buy-in with that can be fantastic. And when you mix that with continuity with your coaching staff, you're familiar with, and you got to hit on those guys. You can't keep around somebody that's not doing their job to the ability that they need to. But if you get the right guys in place and they're willing to stick with you, and because I still think Indiana, even last year, how they were viewed, it was they were viewed as a fraud because they won a lot of games, but the only teams they played with a pulse, really, they got beat by and beat down by, to be honest, and they dodged some competition. So, like, they just weren't viewed very fondly by people. So as far as this coaching staff being super sought after at that time, I don't think that was the case. And I don't know what's going to happen moving forward, but I think those guys are pretty locked in and might end up getting their guys back. I don't know that for sure, but I think there is something to be said about lower rated guys who have been kind of disrespected, and what's their purpose? What's their goal? A lot of these guys are like, just give me the biggest check. That's all I care about. And it's not about who is going to be your teammates. It's not about being somewhere that you love and you feel comfortable. You'll talk yourself to anything. If someone right now said, Clint, I will pay you $10 million a year if you go cover Northwestern football, I'll be like, that's not where I'm passionate. I'm not passionate about the area. I'm not passionate about the team. For $10 million, geez. I mean, guys, I love what I do here. I love it. $10 million, I'd have to consider it. I'd have to consider it if I'm being honest, and then it would break my heart to leave here. But I mean, it's just, that's the decision that some of these guys are facing. It's tough. It really is. But I think there's some truth to what you're saying, Brandon. I think that, and what's wild is right now we're looking at these guys in the transfer portal and we're saying, we got to get the top ranked guys, the ones that everybody's wanting to pay a ton. We've got to get those players, but we also need to have Indiana's mentality. We're trying to simultaneously say that. That's not how that works, right? And now I'm not saying you can't get Indiana's mentality while paying some of these guys. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying that's very, very difficult to do. So, and I'm saying that there's numerous ways that it can work out as far as you missing on some of these guys. It could end up being a bad thing. And I think from a talent standpoint and a depth standpoint, it creates concerns. Ja'Carius Peete, he would have solved a lot of problems for Alabama. I'm not even going to come close to trying to sugarcoat that. He would have. But just because they don't have them does not mean, well, they're not going to have a good team in 2026 as a result. I mean, I still think they're going to be good. I still think they're going to be fun. I am growing somewhat concerned about the youth, though. It is a very young football team. And this has, I mean, maybe it does, but I'm not just saying this because Indiana just won or are going to the national championship as the favorite. And they're a really old football team that everybody's highlighting right now. That's not the reason I'm saying this. Just it makes sense from an experience standpoint that winning and having the mental fortitude and all the things that you need from a maturity standpoint as a football team, all of me at 18, 19, 20 years old versus me at 22 or 23, I know that feels like a short period of time, but I feel like I was much further along with my maturity and stuff at 22, 23, and 24 than I was previous. So a lot of growth as far as becoming a man and stuff really can happen during that time. And I think that helps, from a discipline standpoint. I'll go ahead and tell you, when I was younger, there was no discipline. There's a lot of things I look back in high school and I really regret as far as, my work ethic and the fact that I just, kind of relied on talent. I mean, I did some film study, but not, didn't really sit down worried about the film study. As far as the weight room, there were times, I mean, I'm not going to lie, this is before all this tracking stuff. Now I'd skipped a few sets, a couple of reps. Maybe it was supposed to be, 3 sets of 10 and I'm doing two sets of 10 and 1 set of 7. There was some of that going on. And looking back, I'm ashamed by that, but I was at a different point in my life. And I didn't understand the value of work ethic and stuff. And so my point is that older, more mature guys, a lot of times they're going to bring that, and they can help bring along some of those younger players. From a coaching perspective, if you've got those older guys, then the leadership in your locker room can be better and they can have higher expectations and those things. Right now, Alabama is really, really young on offense, really, really young. So I would like for them to get more experience. I'm sure they will, but it is, I completely agree with you, Brandon. Garrett Gaskin, I appreciate the $9.99 super chat. I get some people are upset about the portal right now for Alabama, and I completely understand, but just let the dust settle and see where we end up. Still a bunch of guys left in the portal. That's exactly right, and that's exactly how I feel. I feel like right now we are a little bit too, you feel like there needs to be a sense of urgency, but you also don't need to panic spend. Spend intelligently. Make sure that they're the right fit. There have been some people, hey, if Jordan Ross isn't giving you an opportunity to come on campus and let you make your pitch, just offer him over the phone. Let him know from a contractual standpoint where that number is going to be sitting, and that way you can entice him to give you an opportunity. You don't want to do that because it is very tough to go back on that because you're going to have to come in a competitive place, but you've never sat down with him. You've never really, maybe there's some high school familiarity, but at least recently you haven't sat down with him and established that relationship and know what he's expecting and wanting. And so you throw a number out there and he's expecting that number, and then he comes in and he's like, you might be bringing him in to say, hey, we got this guy by the name of Yanze Pierre, and we think you're going to be great. And Yanze, we feel like he's going to play one more year and he's going to be gone. So we really feel like in 2027, that's where you're going to become a superstar. But we're going to use you in this way. We're going to get you this kind of workload or snaps. That's our plan, at least. This is how we envision utilizing you both together. But he might come in and say, I want to be on the field 90% of the snaps, coach. Like, I thought that was the point. Like, my point in saying all this is you've got to get a feel for the player. If you're blindly just calling people up and saying, hey, we'll offer you this just to get them to talk to you, that is not good. Number one, you start the conversation when you claim that you don't want it to be about the money. Like, you don't want that to be the top priority. You're going to take care of guys financially, but you don't want to build a football team that is strictly mercenaries. You want guys to want to be at Alabama. When you're starting conversations with numbers, that's not how you start that. So that's going to cause you to miss out on some guys, but you also need to realize that there is some benefit to that as well, as far as team building and things like that. Let things settle down. Let's see where the roster stands. I'm over here complaining or concerned about experience. What if I end up, looking at the depth chart in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and they've got tons of experience on offense because they signed a ton of guys. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? This actually starting to look pretty good. I was complaining about it for no reason. So I'm bringing it up right now. Just say that's concerning. They need to address that. But I'm not going to sit here and say they won't. I think they will. I just highly doubt that they go into the 2026 season with a roster, full, an offensive roster or depth chart filled with nothing but inexperience. That's just, I would think that would be pretty crazy. Let's see. Jumpman, Clint, in the 2 years of watching this staff and front office operate, what evidence gives you the confidence that this program is heading in the right direction? Well, number one, on-field results, because it didn't always look pretty, but you can't deny they went from 9 wins to 11 wins. They didn't go to an SEC championship. Really, they choked away the SEC championship when they should have beat Oklahoma, and they still would have needed to have beat Auburn. But, they had a chance at the SEC championship in 2024, and they choked that away. They didn't this year. They made sure to do what was necessary in order to get and they lost Oklahoma, don't get me wrong, but they still found a way to do what they needed to do to get to the SEC championship. It didn't end up working out in their favor, obviously, but they made the college football playoff. They didn't in 2024, and they won a game in the college football playoff in a very tough environment, an environment in which you had gotten down 17 points and you overcame that adversity. I'm not saying there's not things to be concerned about. I think there's certainly things to be concerned about. But I also think that that's moving in the right direction. And from a recruiting standpoint, a high school recruiting standpoint, they secured a lot of premium talent. And when I look at the tape of some of the lower rated guys, I once again see the vision. And I think that you've potentially got some more London Simmons in there. We'll have to wait and see which players those are. But I really do believe that there were some good evaluations happening on that lower tier. So I think that they're still doing good things from that front. I still think, and there's going to be limited NIL opportunities compared to a Texas or some of these other, Oregon or places like that. Alabama doesn't have the NIL resources that the top of the top have. But I still think, and that is going to cause you some issues. You can't just say, I want this dude, I want this dude. Give him Texas Tech right now. They get him on campus and pretty much say, what you want? What are we thinking? I'll write the check right now. First of all, I don't like that strategy. It has worked for them, and with where they're at as a program or where they were at, I don't blame them for taking that path. But for a place like Alabama, number one, you can't be competitive on that front. I promise you, not to the extent that you would need to. And B, I don't think based off of how you've built your brand and things like that, it's in your best interest to go about it that way. So, I mean, once again, there are concerns. I need to see what happens with the coaching staff post portal. Are they willing to admit some mistakes? A guy by the name of Colin Hitchler, if I'm not mistaken, Kalen DeBoer was willing to let him go. That's one that I kind of forget about, but he let him go. Now he's the defense coordinator I guess at UCLA. He was at James Madison, and James Madison had a really good defense this year, but it wasn't a fit for Alabama. It wasn't. And so Kalen DeBoer and company, they made a move, and he had the tough conversation. So I would like to see that again. I don't think some things are working with the staff. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm still hoping that they make some changes on that front. But while there are concerns, once again, I also think there are some things that are pointing towards Alabama moving in the right direction. Another thing I want to add, let's talk about this real quick. So who are some of the guys that you would want if you didn't have Kalen DeBoer? Dan Lanning? Dan Lanning is 0-2 in the 12-team playoff era, and he has lost both games by 20 points or more with an average margin of loss of 27 points. He's been blown out twice. Or excuse me, he's not 0-2, he's 2-2. My mistake. He did win 2 games, but the 2 losses they were blown out in. Kalen DeBoer's record, I mean, I would need to actually sit and think about it, but 1-1 this year. I guess 1-1, so he's 2-2 as well, with a blowout loss to Indiana that also blew out Oregon, but also he had at least Michigan beat them pretty handedly in the national championship, but overall he got them to the national championship, and I think they were way more competitive than Oregon was against Ohio State last year. My point in saying that is Dan Lanning the answer? Is that the guy that you want? Because there's some things that might cause some concern on his resume. You look at Steve Sarkisian. He has not gotten Texas that is spending each and every year in NIL a lot of money, whether it be on the high school level or on the transfer portal level. And has he got them to a national title game? No. This was supposed to be Texas's year, right? I mean, they Arch Manning, like finally Quinn Ewers out the door. I mean, now we're getting to turn to the prodigy. It's Arch. I mean, this is what they've been building towards. This was the year. They missed the college football playoff. They fell well short of expectations. Their offensive line was terrible. Their run game wasn't very good. Their defense didn't live up to the stand. Well, no, up and down throughout the season. My point is that Steve Sarkisian, same thing. You look at Kirby Smart, the one that Alabama was probably never going to get, but some fans were thinking, go get Kirby Smart. You're Alabama. Go get the best. Kirby Smart is 0-2 in the college football playoffs since winning back-to-back national championships. That includes a 23-10 loss to Notre Dame, in which they were down 20-3 at halftime. And you were a 6.5-point favorite against Ole Miss that didn't even have its head coach, and you lost that game. I'm not trying to take a shot at Oregon, at Texas, or at Georgia. That's not my point. My point is to say, while there's some things that make you concerned about Kalen DeBoer, there's also some things when Kalen DeBoer is really the only one that's being compared to perfection to its own fan base, because Nick Saban had built something that fans are having a very hard time wrapping their mind around. It's never coming back. And they will tell you that, but then their actions don't reflect it, because they'll say, oh yeah, I know we're in a different era. I totally get it. But then they're judging him because he's not, dominating and doing all these things, and the depth doesn't look as good. And you can't close on anybody and everybody you want, like Nick Saban was able to do. Like, You take the best of the best. Everybody knows Dabo Swinney. Everybody knows how that Clemson program has fallen off relative to what it was. They were also national title favorites going into the season. Fell way short of expectations. All these massive big name coaches, they all have blemishes too. So while there are some concerns about Kalen DeBoer and the way that he operates with certain things and the way that certain things have looked, I also think that we need to be more realistic and we need to actually compare him to the current crop of coaches rather than comparing him to Nick Saban, because that's completely unfair in my opinion. I just, once again, another rant I needed to go on a little bit. Let's see. Tino, seems like everybody is underperforming. And what do you mean? Are you saying all these programs, was that based off my rant? Or are you saying for Alabama, it seems like everybody's underperforming? Before I at least want to make sure I know what you're talking about before I address that. But I'm guessing you meant everybody, meaning my rant. Stacy hitting the nail on the head, Clint. I mean, it's just I have to remind myself of these same things, guys. I'm not sitting here telling you guys are terrible people for thinking this way. Sometimes when I first hear about Hollywood Smothers, I was very disappointed, and I was, a little bit hot about it. I was texting my boss. We were going back and forth, and there was some frustration there. But I also have to stop and ask, really try to understand what's happening, remove my emotions from it as much as I possibly can, and try to get into the other person's shoes. I don't think it's great that you didn't get that kid's signature. I don't know why you let that happen, but that should have been a huge red flag. And this whole celebrating and kind of running with this, I probably wouldn't have done it when there's still the opportunity. I understand there's trust. You want there to be trust there, but in this era, people like Texas and LSU, they're gonna do whatever they can to be as competitive as possible. You've got to get the signature. That's concerning. But there's also a lot of this that fans are freaking out over, and I don't agree with the level in which they're freaking out about it. It made me sick to lose Jordan Ross. I dove into that kid's tape. Based off of this idea that maybe you wanted to get closer to home. And, I think from his side, there was some connection immediately to Alabama. And he posted a picture on Instagram of himself in an Alabama t-shirt as a kid, pretty much telling everybody I was a Bama fan. And so I got really that because I'm like, this guy's ultra talented. He hadn't been super productive, but I see really good things on tape where he can really turn the corner. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about metaphorically, not literally. I thought that he could really help that room. And so I dove 2 feet into the tape. I'm watching tons of him. And I'm like, man, I love this. I'm creating this vision for myself. And then LSU doesn't even give him the opportunity to get to Tuscaloosa. That's frustrating. I know if I'm frustrated about it, Alabama staff is frustrated about it. I'm sure they had to feel pretty good about their chances when he first entered. That's why I'm saying don't make the same mistake with Ty Haywood. Do not. He was committed to Alabama. He was an Alabama fan. He got his bag. He's a very talented kid. Make sure you get the first visit. I don't know. Maybe he's already scheduled visits. I know he hadn't scheduled anything, or at least not to my knowledge, as far as a visit to Alabama. But I know that Alabama is very heavily in the mix there. Do what you got to do to get him to be that first visit. Because if someone else makes it, you run a huge risk. But at the same time, you can't go drive and kidnap kids and bring them to your school. You can't do it. They have a decision in this process, and they have a lot of people calling and tugging at them. And some of them saying, you know what? I would like to finish with Alabama. That's the one that is used to, I think, the high school recruiting. It's kind of, if you got the last visit, that was beneficial. It's not how it is now. But maybe from Jordan's perspective, he had no intention of signing with LSU when he got there. He just said, you know what? I want to make sure I do my due diligence. I'll go here first, but I'm going to wind up at Alabama, and I'll just have everything to compare it to at that point, make sure it's the right place, and I sign. But then LSU, whether it's money or something else, they sold him a vision, and he came around, and he didn't even give anybody else an opportunity. That is the risk that you run. So, but at the same time, I can't sit here and say, I cannot believe Alabama didn't get this kid on campus. Can't believe it. You didn't have the opportunity. He didn't give you the opportunity. So I'm never going to blame somebody for something that they had no control over. But what I will say is learn your lesson from it. Just try to do better. Make sure that you're getting Ty Haywood on campus if you can. If he refuses, there's nothing you can do. But I mean, you got to change your approach is my point. All right, let's see. We got another super chat here. Chris, appreciate the $10 super chat. The issue I think people have is how ugly bad losses have been. 6 of the 8 have been either major upsets or losses by multiple touchdowns. Or in last year's Oklahoma game or this year's FSU game, both. 100% fair point. 100% fair point, because I would completely agree with that. The way in which you got destroyed by Indiana, I don't care, what happened against Oregon. I think that did kind of show something. It wasn't as bad as it looked when you got destroyed 38-3. But still, the fact that you were that non-competitive is going to be concerning. I think Oregon fans should be concerned with that. I mean, I didn't think they had it. As soon as I saw them up a ton on James Madison, and I saw guys laughing and cutting up on the sidelines, and they're putting in backups and they're giving up a ton of yardage and allowing James Madison to score points late to end up covering the spread and doing all these things. That just, to me, didn't look like a winning mentality. And I said that. I mean, straight up. I didn't like that at all. And granted, they ended up beating Texas Tech, and I give them respect for that. But Texas Tech was super limited offensively, super limited. And then Oregon goes and they get their tails whipped just like Alabama did. I think the writing in some ways was on the wall there. And I will say their pockets are endless over there at Oregon. And everybody says, I guarantee you there would be a large percentage of Bama fans right now. If you said we could trade Kalen DeBoer for Dan Lanning, they probably would do it, no questions asked. And I don't know that I really agree with that. I like Dan Lanning. I think he's a good coach, but they have concerns as well. But what you're talking about with the, getting beat down and losing games you're not supposed to, I mean, yes, that to me is a concern. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, it happened. It did not happen again. Let's see. So they lost to Florida State to start the season. They lost again to Oklahoma, a college football playoff team. They lost again to Georgia, a college football playoff team. And they lost again to Indiana, a college football national championship appearance team. So after the Florida State game, we didn't see those problems as far as the getting upset by the teams that you shouldn't be losing to, the Vanderbilts, the Oklahomas in 2024. They didn't lose Michigan in the bowl game. We didn't see that again. But now that it's like, okay, I'm starting to see maybe there's some progress on that front being made. You still got to figure out a way to close that gap with the elite of the elite. And I'm not talking about the Missouris and the Tennessees that you did do very well against this year. I'm talking about when you go up against the absolute best of the best, you're competitive. That's something that I still need to see Alabama do. But I haven't seen a Florida State since the Florida State. You know what I'm saying? If in 2026, at any point, they end up dropping a game that they shouldn't, they were 20-plus point favorites or high teens favorites and expected to drum them, and they come out flat and they end up losing, and not only losing, but in some ways getting embarrassed and beat by multiple scores, it will officially be a 3-year trend. And it's like, man, this is just something that's always going to happen. You're always going to let these random teams just that you don't take seriously enough sneak up and beat you. After Florida State, it was a terrible, terrible start to the year based off of how 2024 looked. But after that fact, I can at least say the teams they were supposed to figure out a way to win, they did. They struggled against South Carolina. They struggled against Auburn. But, hostile environments and those teams, if you're South Carolina, in a lot of ways you can save your season. And at the time, I think Shane Beamer probably thought, I'm definitely on the hot seat right now. So one way to fix that, if we can beat Alabama, that would really buy me some leeway. I think there was a lot of motivation there, and they still have talented dudes at South Carolina, and they still have talented dudes at Auburn. So they had the team that was necessary to be competitive, but at least in those games, you found ways to win, which is not something that you did in 2024. In fact, in some ways, you found ways to get dominated by some of those teams. So that's, once again, an improvement. If they have another Florida State in 2026, season opener is against East Carolina, it probably won't happen then. But if they have that one at any point in 2026, it's a 3-year trend. It's happened every year that he's been there. That's a massive problem for me if that happens. So I agree with you, Chris. I don't think that's unfair. I'm also not saying, oh, I think Kalen DeBoer is right up there with Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart and even Steve Sarkisian. I'm not necessarily saying that. I don't think it's a gap. I mean, I don't think that he's like way far behind them. But I'm simply pointing out all these people that you really want Alabama to go higher. There are things that you would be concerned about as a fan if they had done the same thing at Alabama. Like if you could look at Oregon and Dan Lanning had done everything he had done at Oregon at Alabama, you'd be sitting there saying, as fans, the offseason conversation for us right now would be, yeah, I mean, he's done well in the regular season and gone undefeated and got the number 1 seed in the playoffs, but he was the number 1 seed and got destroyed by Ohio State, the eventual national champions. Indiana could very well be the eventual national champions. So I understand that that's a little bit different, but there would be concern about every time that you stepped up against these elite of the elites in the college football playoffs, you've gotten spanked. I mean, we'd be having those conversations. We'd be having the conversations about Steve Sarkisian. Replicate everything he's done at Texas, especially with the NIL resources that have been spent at Alabama. And he'd be saying, man, how in the world do we keep spending like this? And there was regression this year. This was supposed to be the year when we finally got over the top. We were making the quarterfinals, doing big things, being competitive. How in the world do we miss the college football playoff and some of the pieces of our roster look this bad? We'd be having all these conversations with those guys as well. So everybody just thinks, let's go hire one of these guys, and that would fix everything. I'm telling you that it wouldn't. All right. Let's see. Matthew, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Mic drop on the coaching staff. I loved your rant. We need to rally behind Coach DeBoer and lift him up instead of constantly complaining. Coach Saban was the GOAT, but we need to remember he retired. I mean, and the one thing I'm going to do is when I don't agree with something, if I feel like something's off, I'm going to say it. It's the same thing with the Hollywood Smothers thing. It's a bad look. I don't believe in sitting there telling you, no. It's fine, guys. It's fine. They did everything they could. It's no problem, because that's one there. If I can come up with something reasonable to understand how something plays out, then I will give you the benefit of the doubt. That's how my mind has always operated. Jordan Ross, I give you the benefit of the doubt. Jacarius Peak, I give you the benefit of the doubt because you weren't even able to pitch them. You never had the opportunity. They didn't give it to you. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you swung and missed on those guys. That is terrible. You should be fired, whatever. But Hollywood Smothers been on campus and you pitched him and enough where he liked it enough where he actually committed. And then you don't do what you need to do to secure a signature. Now it's, possible. And some would even say likely that you're going to lose him as a result of that. That's a concern. So I'm going to say that, but I can also take these pieces individually and we can have conversations about each of them individually. And I still think there's a lot that Kalen DeBoer and this coaching staff is doing well. And I don't want to create a ton of off-season negativity because there was already a lot of people upset with getting destroyed by Georgia in the SEC championship and getting destroyed by Indiana in the college football playoff heading into the offseason. I don't want to pile on that negativity if, in a month from now, we're looking at the roster and we're saying, actually, things worked out pretty well. We spent a lot of time being negative when it wasn't warranted. So I would at least like to see, are there certain things where it's like, yeah, this doesn't look great, but I would at least like to see where it finishes before I really jump off the ledge here. And even if it doesn't look great, I'm still going to say, okay, maybe they make it work. I'm not going to just say, well, you know what, guys, let's just skip the 2026 season because they just didn't do what they needed to do. And no, we're all still going to be here supporting the Tide, right? Ride or die for a reason. But I mean, I just believe in taking it case by case. Let's see. More super chats rolling in. Appreciate you guys. Eric Birdsong, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Kalen is ahead of all those coaches except Kirby, in my opinion. Dan overrated, and so is Steve. Good coaches, but not great coaches. You are certainly entitled to your opinion, and I don't think it's an absurd opinion. I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but I just don't think that the gap is everybody thinks, man, if Alabama goes and gets Dan Lanning from Oregon and gets rid of Kalen DeBoer, that's going to solve all of their issues. They're good now. Dan Lanning right now has all the resources in the world from an NIL perspective. And I'm not saying that Alabama didn't have resources on the NIL front, but not to Oregon's extent. And that's why I don't think anybody's pulling Dan Lanning away from Oregon. And so give him the limited resources. Is he as good? Because, I mean, he's showing some red flags with everything at his disposal. In my opinion, in an easier conference. I understand what the Big Ten is doing right now. And a lot of people would say that's foolish. I think top to bottom, the SEC is still deeper. I really do. Big Ten is certainly making the statement. I'm not going to ignore that. But, I mean, give him – all of a sudden have Oregon cut what they're spending by, a pretty good chunk. And now you can't just go spend on the Tank Joneses and getting all those guys and also spending in the portal, which I don't even know what they're doing in the portal. I don't know of any massive commits for Oregon. Now, granted, they just finished up, so maybe they just haven't had time to really dive in. Maybe that has something to do with it. But I think that a lot of fans are reading what you're saying, Eric, and they would probably agree with you. And I'm saying that I don't think you're too far off whatsoever. I still say they're in very similar conversations, but there's layers to this for sure. Chance Green, appreciate the $10 super chat. Thanks for all you do. Thanks, Clint, for all you do. I'm starting to not panic quite as much due to the fact that there are so many players in the portal. Just because we don't get these top 4 guys doesn't mean we have failed. Correct. And that's kind of where I'm at. Not saying that everything's good and great, wonderful, everything's fine. You know what? I'm not going to sit up here and get on here and be like, they're doing a great job. They're crushing it. This is amazing. But I'm just saying it's okay to say, it's a little concerning, guys. There's some concerns here. They've missed on some guys that really could have helped. But I don't have enough information right now to tell you how good or not good they're doing, definitively, because there's still tons of guys in the portal. I have dove into almost none of them. So once they add these players, I can then go look at the film and say, okay, what do I like? What do I don't like? Where are the shortcomings? Do I feel like this guy helps this team? How does he help this team? And then we can make a reasonable, educated guess as far as what this roster looks like. I cannot do that right now. And what I'm not going to do is say they've signed 10 players, 9 or 10. And one of them, I think, is a preferred walk-on. So really like single digits so far. And several of those have been specialists, which, by the way, they're putting a massive emphasis on fixing that phase or that element of their roster. And I do think they're going to be better in 2026 as a result. Don't know what will happen with Jay Nunez. We'll have to wait and see. But, specialists, like there's not a whole lot of offensive and defensive guys yet. And a lot of players jumped in the portal because as I've said multiple times, that's the easiest of the two sides is getting in the portal. It's getting guys out of the portal. That's a little bit more difficult. We have no idea what things are going to look like. So I'm going to wait and find out before I jump off the rails and make sweeping assumptions on this coaching staff. Let's see. Is there anything? Let me check. I had some list of topics. Let me make sure that I've at least touched on all of them. And because I'm still going to be reading some of your comments, but let's see. Yeah, Cam Coleman, of course. Definitely need to touch on that. There could have been an update while I've been here for close to an hour with you guys talking. But, as of late or, as of before recording this show, no updates on Cam Coleman. He's on campus. There's been some interesting conversation as far as Instagram accounts following him, Alabama football Instagram account. What does that mean? They typically only follow players. I have no idea what that means. They didn't follow Jordan Ross. They didn't follow Jacarius Peak. They didn't follow maybe they did follow Hollywood Smothers because he committed. But there could be something to that. I'm not going to come up with any sort of sweeping assumptions based off of that. But what I will say is I think there are a large number of people who are of the belief if he continues to demand what is being reported that he's demanding from an NIL perspective, he's probably not going to end up in Tuscaloosa. I think there's truth to that. But I also think that this is a lot more realistic of a possibility than a lot of people are thinking. I think the fact that you lost Isaiah Horton, I think there's a clear role, a clear void that he can fill in the immediate. I like CD Morgan for the future. I still like Derek Meadows. I think they can help you. And if they had to rely on those two guys in 2026, the youth would be concerning. But from a talent standpoint, I would like that pairing. But Cam Coleman gives you an instant impact, instant game-changing option on the perimeter. It would. And I think just from a fit standpoint, he would do excellent. I think as far as the way that this offense wants to operate, under Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, Ty Simpson really didn't bring that element for one reason or another, but that's the vertical passing game. That's throwing the football downfield, really straining defenses vertically. It helps open up as far as the spacing and stuff underneath. It helps as far as your run game is concerned. When you can run the football, obviously that opens up. It works hand in hand. But Cam Coleman, his ability to win downfield, and even when he's not really open, just going up and getting it, and then just having that threat is massive for an offense. And so I would absolutely love what he brought to the table if Alabama can figure out a way to get him, but there's just no update at this point on him. He's continuing on his visit. From what I understand, that'll be happening, today, Saturday, into tonight, I believe. If he ends up leaving, once again, don't like that necessarily. But the fact that Texas A&M is swinging so hard for Isaiah Horton right now, they got another big-time receiver, and I'm trying to remember who. But it's kind of starting to seem like they're maybe not super confident in getting Cam Coleman. That's positive news. You still got Texas. You still got, I think, Texas Tech. And I think Texas would be the more dangerous of the two, but they're also putting even more resources and such into trying to get Hollywood Smothers. Alabama, on the other hand, could be having a pretty penny of their NIL coming available. Maybe that ends up helping land Cam Coleman. I don't know. I think more than likely they're only going to go so high. Like, just there, because once you meet his demands, even the guys that aren't the Cam Coleman caliber talents, they're going to expect you to meet theirs as well. You've opened up the can of worms. It's like, that's why guys in the NFL keep getting paid to be they're now the highest paid quarterback, because they're the latest one who deserves or needs a contract extension. And it's like, dude, you're like quarterback 7, but you're getting paid as the highest paid quarterback because that's the expectation. I mean, if you won't pay it, I go to free agency and someone will pay it because they're desperate to have a serviceable, good starting quarterback. And that desperation creates a market. But Alabama is trying to be disciplined with that, because once you open up that can of worms, you are forever in that, in that world. And I don't think that would bode well for Alabama. So they're not only do I think they need to have discipline, they have to have discipline to an extent. But I also think that's the type of player where if you can make it work, you go to the absolute top that you possibly can without sacrificing some of those things. Rammer Jammer, offensive line is a huge concern. I don't disagree with that because of the youth. I like the talent. I like the fit as far as schematically. I already like where they're at. And I like some of the pieces that they brought in. But if you're talking about 2026, yeah, there's some concern because there's so little experience. Now, granted, they are talking to, guys like DJ Chester, and, obviously Ty Haywood could end up working his way into the mix. DJ Chester would bring an experienced element to the interior. Ty Haywood would not. And granted, it's still early in this process as far as, figuring out exactly who you're going to be targeting and such. But Caden Strayhorn, no experience, essentially. So even the guys they're targeting in the transfer portal, really the only one that brings that experience element is DJ Chester. But that just means that you could have some growing pains early next season. Now, by the end of the year, I think they could have one of the best offensive lines in college football, and they'll be able to do what they want to do because schematically their players can handle it. So in the long run, I think it would be beneficial. But how much could you sustain, and what would you go through to get those guys in a place where they now have the experience that they needed? That would be the concern for me. So to sit here and say it's not a concern, I'm not. That would be foolish, in my opinion, of me. But I also think in the long term, I love the talent, and I think in the long term they would still be, in a pretty good place. Let's see. Eric Birdsong, appreciate the 999 super chat. He's beat Dan twice, and the Texas team Nick lost to in his last season beat them in the playoffs. Just taking time at Bama. Roll Tide, Clint, keep grinding, bro. I'm from Decatur, right by Athens. That's awesome. Have a lot of friends from Decatur. Obviously was over there all the time, so that's very cool. And you're right. I mean, he's beat a lot of really good coaches. I mean, he's 2-1 right now against Kirby. He's beat, as you said, Dan Lanning twice in the same season. He's beat good coaches. So to sit here and say, I mean, he's not a good coach and stuff, that's why I think it's just evidence to say at minimum they're in the same realm. But I think you're making a solid argument for him being ahead of those guys. Once again, don't think I'm quite there. But if you're going to have an argument, make an argument, and you're certainly making one. That's fair, very fair point. Stacy, a lot of talk about Coleman being at the Bama Hoops game tonight. That'd be fun. Hopefully they can go out there and get a win, and it could be a crazy good environment, and the Bama fans can show them love, and make sure to show if you're in Coleman tonight, make sure that you are make sure you're in a good headspace. Like, make it a good atmosphere where he feels the love and stuff. Hopefully the team helps out and gives you a lot to cheer for, where you can say, man, that was a lot of fun. This place is fun. If it's miserable and people were booing and it's, that wouldn't be great. So do your part as a fan if you're there. Unfortunately, I can't go, but let's see. I think, is that dirt bike? Is that what that shirt? Probably not, but appreciate the comment. Way Offside said something last night I agree with. College football can be fixed by Roger Goodell. When the NFL starts getting unprepared, uncommitted, money-only rookies, they'll make noise. That's fair. Something I hadn't really thought about, but I do think with where things are trending, college football's got to stop being you're going to be little brother to the NFL from a money standpoint and all that stuff. I mean, that's inevitable. But this whole idea that the college football gives the NFL a ton, and the NFL does very little in return is both frustrating and unnecessary for college football. There needs to be a relationship there, and it needs to be, I'm not saying that needs to be completely even as far as being mutually beneficial, but you've got to get to a point where college football is benefiting, and really you're setting yourself up. And I think the development side of things, it's not, you say unprepared, that is probably what you're talking about there. But if from a development standpoint, offensive line development, in my opinion, has never been worse on the college level, and that's translating to the NFL. Getting quality starting caliber offensive linemen on the NFL level, it probably has never been harder. Getting quarterback development on the college level has never been harder. So if the NFL would step in and they could figure out a way to really, help some of that, they could help their own product. That you wouldn't be in a situation where you've got to go sign a 44-year-old Phillip Rivers when your starting quarterback gets hurt and you're really your backup, and Anthony Richardson's also already hurt. But because, you would feel like Riley Leonard, while he might not be as talented and the upside might not be as great, he at least understands what to do. And granted, he looked pretty good, I think, decently well in their last final game when he actually started. But anyways, I do think there's something to be said about that. I think you make a good point there. Hector, appreciate the comment. Clint, getting elite playmakers through the portal means nothing if we can't block for the quarterbacks, running backs, great wide receivers last year, and it didn't matter because we couldn't block. Have to prioritize elite offensive line in the portal. Yes, I agree with that, and that's something that I would like to see. DJ Chester, to me, he's got some talent. I don't think he's a huge needle mover for me. I think he can come in. I think he's like I've compared him to Geno Vandermark in the sense of that's a guy who I don't think fans understand. He could come in and actually be competitive and win a job. Now, in hindsight, a lot of people would probably say, well, Geno was not overly great, and if you were in a position where he has to start for you, that probably doesn't bode well for your offensive line. I know that that's an argument people will make, and I think there's some validity to that. But I think he can help your depth. I think he can help your experience. But the fact that he was the sixth man for a not great offensive line is never going to be a great selling point. Ty Haywood, I think, would make fans pretty excited. They know what kind of talent he has. There's a reason that Michigan gave him the bag, but he was a raw player. And I said that. And that's why I think Michigan made a mistake giving him the bag, because you paid him a lot of money to force him to flip from Alabama, give him, an option he can't refuse. And then you help develop him for a year. You get nothing out of him essentially. And then he just enters the transfer portal and could end up back at Alabama. And what did you get from that? You got absolutely nothing. And that's why I think eventually you're going to see some of this on the high school level. It's going to start to change a little bit. And in fact, you actually might already be seeing that. But I still think Ty Haywood can be a very, very good player for you. But you've got it. It's not necessarily prioritizing the elite established offensive lineman, but if you don't get that caliber of player, you've got to get development. I keep harping on this. You have to. You don't have a choice. It has come to a point where you've got too much talent on this roster. Jackson Lloyd is a very talented guy. Michael Carroll. I think Caden Strayhorn has a lot of talent. If you get a Ty Haywood, tons of talent. Bryson Cooley, lots of upside and talent. You've got dudes on your offensive line. It's time to get them to start playing like dudes consistently. You haven't been doing that enough. So, I would agree with that comment. Let's see. Yeah, you guys have been doing great with these comments. I was jealous watching Miami's offensive line the other night. Yeah, I mean, it really is. It is tough. They've got talent, and some of that stuff, it was kind of prior to the portal becoming like a massive thing and NIL becoming a massive thing, where I think guys were a little bit more affordable. Because right now, the way that it's working is all these quarterback numbers that you're seeing, Bryce Young becoming the first 7-figure quarterback, that was 4 years ago. And now guys are like 5, 6 million, and then it'll become 7, 8 million, and then become 8, 9 million, and then become 9, 10. Some of Miami's, they were able to benefit from getting some of these star young players who kind of stuck around. They made sure they were taken care of financially, I'm sure, but they were able to keep them and develop them while also kind of filling in some spaces and some gaps. Like Brockermeyer was absolutely great for them. James Brockermeyer, the former Alabama center, he was great for them this year at center. Like, that's when you went out and got. But was he this huge, big name player? Was he this elite 5-star or highly, one of the few 4-stars in the transfer portal that Miami signed? No. I mean, he was a guy that had not really done a whole lot at Alabama, was kind of viewed as a potential player, a little bit undersized, but he goes to TCU and, doesn't do a whole lot there, ends up entering the transfer portal, ends up at a place like Miami, and ends up making a huge impact. This idea that you got to go get the elite of the elite in the transfer portal, you've got to evaluate. You got to make sure you get the right guys in there. But I would agree with you. It's pretty evident where the shortcomings come from when playing against the elite of the elite. They're not winning in the trenches enough. And what's wild is you add a corner, which I do like, in Carmelo O'Neal. You're going after Cam Coleman, and that's a big fish that would really help your offense. Hollywood Smothers was one of the first guys you got. Trench play, while I do think that it's going to be harder to kind of close on some of the guys in the trenches because everybody understands the importance of that, you've got to do something to improve your trench play, because it just wasn't up to par this season. It really hadn't been up to par the last couple of years. Brandon from DC, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Clint, we need to get a running game coordinator that specializes in offensive line play. Grubb has proven that he doesn't have a feel for the run game. Will help. I don't disagree with that at all. I definitely think that would help. That to me, having someone there that kind of their priority is the run game, and they're familiar with it, they understand it, they understand how it fits within the offense, and can kind of be the voice of reason for Ryan Grubb to kind of, what do they call those guys that pull the coaches back in when they get too far? Like I forget what they call them, sideline guys or something, where you are kind of having to reel back in the head coach when he's getting too far out on the field. The get back guys, I think, is what they call them. having somebody for the run game that can kind of reel Ryan Grubb back in and kind of be someone that he can trust, I think that would be massive, massive, massive for the offense. Maybe that could cause some friction, which maybe wouldn't be great, but I think overall, if he could really trust that person, they worked well together, it could really make a huge difference. So hopefully they make that type of move. I haven't heard anything, but we'll see. All right, guys. That's you know what? It's been an hour and 15. I'm probably going to hop out of here. We talked about a lot of this. Got a lot of stuff off my chest. You guys were fantastic as always. As far as the comments and the contributions. If something big happens, I'll go live again. Like, this is going to be because the news is always changing, and the way that I have to pitch some of these videos, sometimes it gets very outdated very quickly. As in, when you make a video and you base it around Jacarius Peak and how he would be a complete game changer for Alabama's offense, and then 3 hours later he commits to South Carolina and doesn't even come on his visit to Alabama. But that's how it is, and that's why I've decided to start going live for all of this, give you guys a chance to interact, and we'll, if anything big happens, I'll certainly be back, or if enough happens, I'll also be back today. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. And granted, after yesterday, I just needed to go live yesterday. I didn't. I was holding out for the Cam Coleman stuff, and nothing ended up moving on it, and I decided, we're not going to do that again. So just until the transfer portal is closed, expect me probably to be going live every day, at least once, maybe twice. And we'll get maybe some guests in here, or some, like EG, or maybe Cotton back in here, or, there's some other people I've been talking to. Obviously, I'll be talking to Jimmy this next week, and we'll be hashing all this stuff out. So still can end up being, some great conversations, but we're going to have a ton of content for you guys. We just want to make sure that you guys are staying up to date and aware of everything going on. I appreciate you guys so much. Get on over to rowback.com and use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order, and we will talk to you guys soon.